So Rob actually started Braintrust a couple of years ago as a way that he was finding out, like, when you do startup-y stuff, and Rob's a Y Combinator veteran, so people asking for advice all the time. And he realized that when you think you know what you're doing, you're very good at giving advice, but you don't actually know if that's good advice. If it's bad advice, you just don't hear from the people again. Generally, you don't hear from people anyways. So he started Braintrust as this way that we could give each other advice, but actually hear back every 2 weeks. Like, did that work out? So,
I don't know, is this the VC? Fishbowl?
No.
Alright.
So he invited a bunch of us to just join this peer advisory group. And over the next 2 years, it kind of ran and then stopped and ran and then stopped. And it kind of each time either like imploded under its own weight or just like kind of just didn't work for various reasons. But each time we looked at what went wrong and we modified the format. Wrong, everybody. So recently what we've done is, Rob and I have actually teamed up. We do different kind of startup workshops, business models, test dev, that kind of stuff. And when we teamed up to do them, we started to realize that our ethos of basically supporting startups that don't get support through the current ecosystem, right? So a lot of it is really focused on accelerators and sort of investable businesses, high growth businesses. But there's loads of great ideas that, you know, as a founder, it's a great business, it's just not investable. So where's the support? And one of the ways we realized that we could do that quite well is by opening up this Braintrust format so that we could all form our own peer advisory groups. So I covered a lot of sort of the main benefits of it earlier. So one is that because you have to check in regularly, if you don't get your learning done, like you're like, I'm a lean startup guy, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do custod, and you don't do it, you have 3 people just looking at you like, you know, what have you been doing for like the last week or 2? So there's a social kind of push to actually make progress. But also, it just helps you step back. So when you're in your problem, it's quite hard to see the alternatives, it's quite hard to see the bigger picture. And it's really good when you're checking in with the same people every week. You don't need to spend time like re-describing what you're doing. They understand the whole backstory. So it's really easy for them basically to call bullshit on you or to like help you go in a better direction or spot something you just haven't seen. So I'll start by, like, if you just don't mind handing these out. I don't know if there's enough, but you can look over the shoulder of the person beside you. So the format is basically before the Braintrust, you just think about these things. So you think about what progress you've made, you think about the problems you've encountered, and you think about your learning goal for the next week. Then you subject yourself to the Braintrust, which is basically you take 1 hour out. And so one of the rules we figured out is never let a Braintrust take longer than an hour. As soon as you break that rule, it gets longer and longer and longer until Braintrust takes 3 hours and nobody goes anymore because it's just not worth it. So what we do is it's usually groups of 3 or 4. We split the times, we split the hour up. We use a timer. And I left my bag in the other room, so I don't have a timer. Usually I just get my iPad out and plunk it down and have a timer. And each person takes 3 minutes just to cover these things. So you've already written it out yourself. So you can really quickly just describe it to people. And then it's 5 minutes of feedback. And that feedback is less focused on like what the idea is and more focused on risks that you see, things that they should be checking and they're not. Like, I'm worried about you because you're not looking at this thing. Or things that you aren't aware of. Like, oh, you're doing that, you should know about this tool. Or did you know, like, if you're going in that direction, you should know about these competitors. Stuff like that, just like really quick. And because the feedback is really like fast-paced, you've only got 5 minutes of feedback max. So it's like 3 minutes to talk, 5 minutes to get feedback. It's like, you can't be tactful. It's just like, I wouldn't do this, I would do this. And then the other person says, I would do this, I would do this. Yeah?
Is it typically within the same industry segment, or is it more across these little teams that meet every 2 weeks?
So we haven't really been explicit about that, and at the moment we're just opening the format out. So we're still working out which one. Last week we actually got that feedback from people in doing the Braintrust, and it went both ways. So it's like, one, it's good to have people in the same space because then they get it. But on the other hand, we got a lot of feedback that people were getting sort of naive feedback was really useful. Like, I don't get it, why does this happen? And that helps them really sort of step back and articulate problems better. And,
Next then maybe.
yeah, and become a bit iconoclastic. I think it has to be people you trust. It has to be people you respect. It doesn't need to be like super experts. It's just more like, you know, a variety of perspectives is useful, like in and of itself. So, did I miss anything? You kind of stepped in and out.
I missed parts.
All right. So that's the type of feedback. Oh yeah, that was the thing I missed. Is that it's useful to have post-it notes or blank business cards for feedback, because 5 minutes isn't enough for everybody to say their bit. But if you just have something like, oh, you should check this out, you just write down the website, pop it on a card, throw it on the table. And then the people, like after you're done, you just grab the cards and you can go through them in your own time. And also like just offlining any discussion. So it's really, really fast feedback. And if it turns into this big discussion, like, you can ask questions and challenge them, obviously. But if it turns into this thing that's bigger, it's like, okay, let's pick that up afterwards. If it's worth it, they'll follow up with you. Yep.
Is it necessarily face-to-face?
So far it has been. We tried, like, a few people like, oh, I'll Skype in, and it just didn't really work. But I wouldn't say no definitively, but so far we found it really works in person. So yeah.
I'd be interested in trying it as a Google Hangout, like just something where it's for the, we don't have an answer one way or the other.
Yeah. And so the other thing is we are looking at, so a lot of the stuff we're doing with our founder-centric business, the startup support business, is we're looking at tools that we can spin out, basically just make them open and free tools. So like things like Braintrust, we're looking at turning them into like some kind of web or email service that helps you facilitate them. And we'll just, if we get that right, we'll just open it up to everybody. So I wonder if it's worth, at this stage, trying one, just as an example, really quickly.
Yeah.
You gonna need a timer?
Awesome. So, how much?
What number works best in terms of the size? Or have you not?
Between 3 and 6. More than 6, it completely falls apart.
How long do you want?
Sorry?
3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes?
What do we go? We got, when does the session end? In 20 minutes?
I think 5 minutes.
Okay, so let's get, we can probably do, let's do, 8 minutes is good. We can get we'll get 2 done. We'll get 2 examples in that time.
Alright. Starting now. Or...
Oh, no, hang on. So let's get, we'll need 3 volunteers.
I might as well.
You want that?
Should I come out or?
Yep. And so you should be working on something actively, pretty much. It's like, it's not necessary for the Braintrust, but it'll be better for the example on stage.
Volunteers?
Yeah, cool.
Can you put your chair when you run out of here?
Yeah, we can simulate a pub or cafe environment. Grab some coffee.
Oh, yeah, 3.
There's one here, so. You've got all sort of bootstrap challenge goodness, so here we go. So start the timer, and he should be able to see it, so he knows when 3 minutes is up.
3 minutes now.
Yeah, or set it for 8, so he just knows when 3 minutes is up, and then we go straight into.
Let me just do 3 and 3. It's like just normal.
Okay. All right.
So 3 minutes.
Cool. So the sort of one-liner is that I'm building a really simple analytics tool where you don't actually have to go to a website to check your analytics. The analytics come to you when they matter. So basically it sends you a text message when your site is posted to a social media site like Hacker News or Reddit, where potentially like 20,000 people could show up on your door and like with no notice. So it tells you when that happens, then it tells you if it starts to take off, and it just like pings you a text with the link. It's like, you might want to know about this. So the progress was that I finally launched version 1. A few hundred people signed up. I found out that people were hearing about it through the service itself, so that was like a nice sort of reminder that it was actually working. The problems I'm having is that I basically, it costs me money every time I send a text, and at this point I have no evidence of whether it's going to make money or not. So my plan is to kind of try to learn about the money side. What I was initially planning to do was wait until people get like 3 alerts about their site, and then be like, hey, you're out of credits. Why don't you sign up? And then I could find out if they wanted to or not. But I'm realizing that not everyone blogs as much as I do, and so their 3 alerts are going to take months to arrive. So I'm just never going to learn if people will actually pay for it or not. So I want to basically ignore all the old users and try to come up with some sort of pricing scheme for new users, so that I can start charge them up front and try to get an earlier signal about whether anyone would pay for something like this or not. So yeah, I mean. Yeah.
So Joey had a question, right? Like in the Braintrust, usually you would ask questions.
Yeah, but did you cover your learning goal for next week?
Yeah, my learning goal is the pricing. So what I was planning to do, and I'm really debating this, so maybe you guys can help. I was essentially going to say, okay, it's no longer free. You pay from at the door. It's like a small subscription, which gives you up to a certain number of alerts, and then tier it. So the lowest tier would be like $2 a month or something trivial. I don't know if that's too low, because if you bring people over the burden of paying it all, maybe they're going to pay more. Anyway, so I don't really know how the pricing should be structured. I don't know what to do to really learn what I need to about what the right pricing place for it is. But that's my goal. I'd like to learn that somehow.
Right, so you mentioned hundreds of people signing up, but where did you get the people? Twitter?
That was through Hacker News. So, and I can drive more pretty easily through Reddit, through Twitter, I can get ads. I can lose money on ads just to get people there to see if it would make money organically.
And they were individuals, do you kind of know who the customer is?
I know their phone numbers.
But you want those 3 events to happen very quickly in a short period of time.
Ideally, yeah.
So should we do another 5 minutes to talk? Or
Sorry. So normally we'll just set it for 8 minutes, so that at the end of when
Makes
it's
sense.
5 minutes left, we just never keep going. So it feels to me like, so this idea that you actually don't know what you're selling, is what it feels like, because you're.
Yeah.
Right. So
it was a little product, so I kind of jumped into building it before I ever bothered figuring out if it was a good idea.
Right. So I think. So if the idea is to push the payment decision forward, then the next question will be is how do you articulate the value proposition from the customer's point of view?
I don't know. I'm not that concerned about that, because a lot of people were like, "This is amazing," or they send me nice little emails and they're like, "This is so cool," and I got a lot of feature requests already. So I feel like the basic value proposition sort of works, at least at the price point of free.
What is it? Yeah. People love free stuff. What's the value proposition?
It's get a text when your site is posted to Hacker News or Reddit, and then in parentheses it says, and that's it.
And why do people care about that?
Because you might have a PR opportunity or disaster, and the whole thing happens in an hour. And so by the time you check your analytics at the end of the day, you've already missed the chance to get involved and fix it and improve it.
So how many of your existing users would agree with you about that?
Once you signed up, I don't know.
Okay, so so I think.
So you would go back and try to, I guess, get some better signal on the main value proposition.
Yeah, I mean you can phone all these people and talk to them. So I would, so that's what I would do, to say why do you want this at all, and then that will give you stuff to test on your landing page.
Okay. You mentioned frequency, right? If you find people who actually have a higher frequency of posting, then they might potentially find a higher value. Right?
Yeah.
That's the question, if you can actually segment the customers that way.
So I mean, what would you guys do if you were in my shoes? What would you spend the next week working on?
That's what he said.
Really? You guys would seriously call strangers? You should see the country codes on these phone
You
numbers.
use emails as well?
Yeah, come on.
Dude,
Text them first.
But they've signed up. They trust you enough to give you their phone number. First of all, stupid. And no, but the thing is, I don't know if you've seen the sign-up pages, but they're actually really kind of funny and cool. So I'm pretty sure they'd be happy to get a phone call from you, right? I wouldn't worry about that. The other thing that worries me though is so it's an analog or an anti-log actually with LeanCamp in the membership. So I thought it was a great idea. So the idea was with LeanCamp was when we were considering whether or not a membership model would work better than just selling tickets for events to cover the cost. And it seemed like if you could get, instead of, because it's like the costs are, it's about 100 euros per person, believe it or not, to run one of these things. And, but if everyone was subscribing for 50 euros a year, we could actually do a lot more. There's stuff we could do with cost. So anyway, it seemed like a really good deal. Like, of course they're going to love it. It's half the price to go to as many events as you want for a year. But it turns out that the buying decision of a subscription was totally different than one-offs. And framing it as a subscription service meant that it was only people who were really committed for a whole year who would actually, they wouldn't say, oh, it's cheaper, I'll just go to one event. Nobody makes that decision in their head. They're like, am I going to use this for a year? And when they say no, they don't buy it. So, and then I spoke to those people who did sign up, and I found out that it was only like really, really focused people, and the market wasn't big enough, which is what I'm worried about here. So framing the pricing certain ways is going to.
Couldn't I try that by just framing the pricing? Like, I can get people there and try to sell it to them.
Yeah. I'm not saying how. I'm just saying like I'm worried that the framing of pricing might change what your market is. Like, is it really like if it's a subscription service, it's going to be somebody I think who just blogs quite heavily already, which is going to be a limited market. So I don't know. It's something I worry about. I don't know how to test it. But,
All right, guys.
How often would they interact with your product?
They do it once and then never again. So they sign up once and then it occasionally texts them and it's like, hey, something awesome or terrible is happening. Go deal with it. And I guess maybe they would come back to pay me, hopefully.
Yeah,
but
so you'd have to get them back at the end of the trial. You'd have to get them back at least once.
Is there analogs or analogs in the market? Like analog, for example, will you, like a long-based company, do social media monitoring? There's a couple of others as well.
Yeah.
Like what are they not doing, or like why are people unhappy with that one?
Yeah, so there's Go Squared, and they charge significantly more, and it's a bit more to set up. You have to do stuff, and it basically, if your traffic gets bigger, for like right then they'll text you, and it does a ton of other stuff. It's basically a minor feature. So my hope was to pull out that one feature, like bring the price point for that specific use case way down, and then see what happens. But I know the guys, so I'll go and talk to them, and I bet they could give me some insight.
Would they?
You're out of time.
Oh, okay. I would now write that down. I was thinking. So yeah.
Would you try to define the learning goal though? Like would you?
No. So now Rob can redefine what his learning goal is if, based on that input, he wants to change it.
Right, but he's not going to present it to the group.
No.
And it needn't always be linked to an experiment, right? It's just a problem or a challenge. That
It's generally it's a learning goal, but it doesn't even need to be a learning goal.
Yeah.
So it can be like, you just have to do this by next week, you know.
Right.
But yeah.
I think we have another 10 minutes left in the session.
Okay, let's. So normally we'd go straight on. So like set a timer for 8 minutes. Sure.
Does one of you guys want to let us know?
Or should we do the whole like?
No, let's do one of you guys.
I'll talk about our problem. We've so Scurry, the service we built, is a delivery platform where we simplify delivery across all these queries. And we refine our segment to businesses because small businesses can't get any level of engagement with in their mind tier 1 queries. So we collapsed that into a quality thing because universally we don't care who the courier is. We just want a courier at a price for a type of service, and that's how we present the results. So they say I want to go from here to here, and we say this is the best service. And service means quality as you've rated it historically, you've been all the users, and then service type, what you're getting for your money, and then we link that in. Our model is built around repeat usage, so we're releasing it next week in a light version. So it doesn't have a pricing plan or the like, but it's built. It's very one-off. Fire and forget, but we're looking to see how can we see who comes back and what sort of usage they have, and also did it matter? I mean, they all said, and we interviewed about 40 people. Everyone said we don't care who the courier is, but do they really? When we have just a rating, do they have enough trust in that to still feel confident enough to book it? Because as a business, they're putting a lot of faith in this solution because they don't want, as a small business, they don't want to have detractors because of crappy delivery or an issue that occurred during delivery. So our immediate problem is, we've got two actually. It's the pricing structure. So how do we simplify the pricing structure in a way that makes sense and is practical to the businesses? And also, do they, even if pricing aside, are they coming back and using this site? So we had our other model, a model prior to that, prior to the pivot, was consumer focused. So it was one-off. They may come back, but we were looking at just hooking them in, getting a delivery, and off they go. We didn't track repeat usage, or it wasn't what we were looking for. So our challenge is that it's validating the pricing, but also looking at, have we built it in a way that facilitates a return? You know, do they ever come back and use it again? They should. You know. So that's kind of where we're up to.
Learning goal for the next week?
Our learning goal is when the release drops today, we want to check ultimately, are we converting better than we did previously, and also are we getting customers coming back and using the system, because we built it with that in mind. You know, we're making it really easy and slick so that next time you have all these things done for you. So that's the goal.
Okay, cool.
Is that kind of how it was structured?
Yeah, it's good. So,
You've got 5 minutes.
okay, cool.
Right now.
Okay, I'll start. So this is more of a generic answer and might not be terribly useful, but getting pricing right isn't a single learning goal. There's like tons of stuff you have to figure out within that.
Yeah.
So like typically it's what's the pricing sensitivity, what will people pay for, at what threshold do we then charge them, and if you split those up as separate learning goals, then you can actually piece them out. So it's not like sort of, okay, we're going to do this pricing plan with, you know, these benefits.
It is that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, so when you, actually Rob, it's a good way of explaining this, define if your learning goal is to understand something or to verify. And if you're verifying without first seeking to understand, then you're throwing darts, like blind, right?
It's just a 5-minute one.
Okay, so you can separate things out, like, so one of the things you said was, you need to see if people come back next week. So that's measuring retention as a proxy for is this valuable, right? So that alone, like, there's no pricing in there, right? It's just is it valuable after they use it?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
After you know that, then you can start to put arbitrary pricing limits, like when they use a feature so many times. At that point, ask them to pay.
Okay.
And just see if they even like click the plans and pricing button.
Yeah,
At that point,
yeah.
if they're considering paying at that point, or if you just go, okay, I won't use it.
Yeah.
And you can test at different thresholds without even putting numbers in front of them to see if they have any commercial intent. So it's just that way to start to separate the learning goals as like, at what stage at what stage will they consider paying, and then you can ask how much afterwards. Right?
But I guess in your sense, most of the landing page, right? Like you basically want to like change, say, an online page. Are your business frequently sending packages, right? And like how often do you send a package? Okay, then we give you a quote, kind of like that's your subscription, right?
No,
how would that work?
Our model is we're trying to say we didn't take that. We built a pricing structure, and we were thinking how do we validate that. It's based on, you know, if you pay this much more, you get this much more of a discount for this amount.
Oh,
of money.
okay, right.
Otherwise, you pay a standard rate on this, whatever.
Right, it's a certain commitment, basically.
Yeah, and it's a cash positive, so we're asking them to pay up front, and then that account is credited, and it's a monthly subscription.
You're not going to take like a margin off of the transactions?
We do, yeah, so we add a margin to the rates that we secure.
If on my plans, I'd like just a margin on top of that and not subscription. I'm sure that's my volume was at a certain level.
Say that again?
It's just a margin, just paying a certain fee instead of going directly through you, you not charging me. If I pay 100 quid a month and you not charging me to ship package A to location here, but if I could just pay an extra 3 or 4 euro, as I do when I order from Amazon or anywhere else, that's a pricing model that, well, I'm inherently comfortable with because I do it all the time.
Okay.
You know, I'm used. It's not new.
Yeah.
It might be as good because recurring revenue is great, but it just sits with me as something it would make inherent sense, and I would just go for that.
Yeah.
That's consumer versus business, though, right?
Yeah.
Well, like you as a consumer, you're talking most of the business of
Yeah. But then you can unitize costs for. Then you can just do the great metric of each shipping each good costs this much.
Right.
And you get that metric, so you scale the cost up and down, which is the we're seeing in our pricing model a bit. Do you charge per user or do you charge per in these big bands? That you get edge cases, which people get really upset about. If they have one more user and it's 100 quid extra a month, you get those calls which aren't very good.
So, well, shall we wrap
got
this one
about
up
2
a
minutes,
minute early
yeah.
and get out in time for the lunch queue? But thank you very much, guys. The last thing I wanted to say, just about my experience with this format, we started it when I had just moved from San Francisco to London. And in San Francisco, you get a lot of community support just by default, just by being there, right? You're like crying in the pub, and the guy next to you is like, don't worry, man, I've got out of business too. And like in other cities, like you don't have that critical mass yet, so we have to do a little bit of work ourselves. But what I found, and what was a huge revelation to me, is that you don't need a city full of startup people. You need a small group of startup people, and you need to like be able to be open with each other and be like, things are not going well. I'm having these problems. And then other people who kind of like know your business and have seen the trajectory over a few weeks or months, they're like, they kind of get a feel for it and they're able to help out. So for me, doing the Braintrust in London gave me like 90% of the community benefits that I got from the Valley. And in some ways, like the reason I stay in London is because I now have a better community there, right? This little bit of work to tie people together, there's people whose story I really know and like they're able to help me in return. So I would really encourage you guys to, maybe not this particular format, but like something like it. Like take it with you, set it up, facilitate a group, get a few founders together and help each other out.
Yeah, that's a really good point because, I suppose that's part of what we're trying to do here and build a startup community in Dublin. We know the startups thriving in Dublin, but we are trying to pull communities together because it's a little bit disjointed. There's groups hanging out in different places. So.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be arduous. You can do it over beer.
One thing, if you want more information, check in or track this session on Lanyard, and then we can push content to you about it when we ask stuff to share.
Oh no, we actually have some. We meet the first Wednesday of every month in PPP from 8 to 9. It's not as well organized as you did, but we've been trying to work on it the last couple of months.
All right, awesome.
Almost that format.
So that's Mondays at 8?
It's the first Wednesday of every month in KCP, just 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock in the morning. It's just a change from the nighttime meetups. Just maybe meet over breakfast then.
Oh, nice. Can you post that on this session later? Finish the link to the details? Nice.
Thank you.
How's it going?
All right.